At 37 years old, Roman earned $56,000 a year as a school bus mechanic. He could diagnose a failing transmission by the shudder it sent through the floorboards and tell you the brake pad life on a 2012 Thomas Safety Liner C2 just by the pitch of its squeal. His hands, calloused and permanently marked with the ghosts of old grease stains, could fix almost anything except his marriage. That, he was beginning to understand, was a machine designed to break him. The realization came into sharp, unbearable focus on Easter Sunday, seated at a table that was itself a monument to everything he was not. It was a 20-foot slab of polished mahogany in his mother-in-law Bernadette's Ardsley Park home. Ardsmond, a place of hushed carpets and air that smelled of lilies and money. The table was set for 12, though there were only 4 of them: Roman, his wife Tasha, her mother Bernadette, and Bernadette's silent, grim-faced attorney, a man named Marcus, whose $4,000 Brioni suit seemed to quietly judge Roman's best $120 department store blazer. Bernadette presided over the meal from the head of the table, a queen in her own universe. Her dress was a pale yellow Chanel number that probably cost more than Roman's 2010 Honda Civic was worth. She looked at Roman with an expression she'd perfected over the 7 years he'd been married to her daughter, a blend of faint pity and even fainter disgust. "Roman," she began, her voice smooth as the $300 a bottle Sancerre in their glasses, "Tasha and I have been talking about the future, about trajectory." Roman felt the familiar clench in his stomach. He looked at Tasha, his wife of 7 years. She sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the floral centerpiece. Her hair, once a cascade of beautiful, tight coils he'd loved to watch her twist and pin, was now chemically straightened into a severe, glossy sheet that fell past her shoulders. It was Bernadette's preference. Easier to manage, she'd said. More professional. Tasha's dress was a $900 silk wrap affair that matched her mother's, a visual signal of their united front. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "We feel," Bernadette continued, placing her fork down with a delicate click against the Villeroy and Boch china, "that this union has run its course. It was perhaps a mistake from the start, a youthful indiscretion on Tasha's part, but we are people who correct our mistakes." The phrase hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A mistake we keep correcting. It was her favorite refrain, a line she'd deployed for years in quieter, more subtle ways. When he'd bought Tasha a simple silver locket for their anniversary, Bernadette had replaced it the next week with a $3,500 Cartier pendant. When he'd proudly paid off his student loans, Bernadette had sighed and said, "Well, at least that's one less burden for Tasha to carry." Now the subtlety was gone. This was an execution. Marcus, the lawyer, slid a slim leather folio across the polished wood. It stopped perfectly in front of Tasha. He opened it, revealing a single, crisp document. "This is an agreement for an annulment," Marcus said, his voice as dry as old paper. "It's cleaner than a divorce. We're petitioning on the grounds of misrepresentation." Roman stared at him. "Misrepresentation? What did I misrepresent?" Bernadette let out a small, almost bored-sounding laugh. "Oh, Roman, please, don't make this more unpleasant than it has to be. You came into this family with nothing. You work a functional job. It's admirable, in its own way, like a sturdy workhorse. But Tasha was bred for the race. She is meant for a life you cannot provide and, frankly, cannot comprehend." He finally looked at Tasha, a desperate, silent plea. "Say something. Fight for us." She picked up a heavy silver pen, a Mont Blanc, probably another $1,000 object on this table of casual wealth. Her hand trembled slightly. Tasha?" he whispered. His voice sounded small and foreign in the cavernous dining room. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, distant. "It's for the best, Roman. Mama's right. We want different things. I've wanted different things for a long time." "So you just end it? At Easter dinner?" "It seemed the most efficient way to handle it," Bernadette cut in, waving a dismissive hand. "We're all here. No need for messy phone calls or drawn-out drama. Sign the papers, and we can all move on with our lives. You'll be compensated, of course. A severance, if you will. $20,000 for your time." The insult was so profound, so complete, that it almost didn't register. $20,000 to erase 7 years of his life, 7 years of packing Tasha's lunch every morning, of fixing her car when it broke down, of holding her when her father passed, of believing they were building a life together, brick by brick. He scanned the document from across the table. He saw the legal jargon, the dense blocks of text, and then he saw the line that Marcus was pointing to, where Tasha was meant to sign. The petition described him, Roman Thompson, as a non-contributing spouse of questionable origin. Questionable origin. The words were a physical blow. He was a black man from Kyler, Brownsville, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. His origin wasn't questionable. It was just different from theirs. It was a world of grit and love and community, not manicured lawns and inherited portfolios. To them, that made it illegitimate. Tasha didn't even seem to register the cruelty of the language. She took a deep breath, her knuckles white around the expensive pen, and signed her name with a smooth, practiced flourish. She slid the folio back to Marcus. She did not look at her husband. Roman felt the floor drop out from under him. He was a mistake, a workhorse, a non-contributing spouse of questionable origin. He had no idea, sitting there in his cheap blazer, his world reduced to a signature on a piece of paper, that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. He had no idea what was coming. Have you ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love you? It's a pain that sinks into your bones. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to find the strength to stand up for your own worth. The 7 years leading up to that Easter dinner had been a masterclass in domestic camouflage. On the surface, Roman and Tasha were a modern couple navigating their differences. He was the steady, hands-on mechanic. She was the ambitious marketing director at a high-end real estate firm in downtown Savannah. Their life was a collage of carefully curated moments, most of them designed by Tasha and funded by Bernadette. Their first apartment, a cramped but sunny 1-bedroom in the Starland district, had felt like theirs. It cost them $1,200 a month, a sum they split down the middle. Roman had painted the walls, fixed the leaky faucet with a $5 washer he got from the hardware store, and built a small bookshelf out of reclaimed wood. He filled it with his collection of automotive repair manuals and Tasha's growing library of business bestsellers. For a year, it was enough. Then Bernadette had visited. She'd walked through the 700-square-foot space, her $1,800 Louis Vuitton handbag clutched in her manicured fingers, her nose wrinkled slightly. "It's cozy," she'd said, the word landing like an insult. "But Tasha, darling, how can you think big thoughts in such a small box?" 2 months later, they moved. The new place was a 2-bedroom condo on Oakmont Drive, closer to Ardsley Park. The rent was $2,800 a month. Roman's salary could barely cover his half, but Tasha insisted. "Mama is helping out," she'd said vaguely. The condo was sleek and impersonal, with gray walls and recessed lighting. The bookshelf Roman had built didn't fit the aesthetic. It was relegated to the back of a closet, replaced by a $2,200 minimalist chrome unit from an expensive catalog. Their life became a series of these subtle, expensive erasures. Roman's sturdy $89 Timex watch, a gift from his late father, was a source of constant, quiet shame for Tasha. "It's just so loud," she'd say of its ticking. For his 30th birthday, Bernadette gave him a $4,500 Tag Heuer. It was heavy on his wrist and felt like a costume. He wore it only when they visited her. Most days he'd put on his Timex in the truck on his way to the depot. The familiar weight a small act of rebellion. The financial disparity was a chasm they pretended wasn't there. He made his $56,000, every dollar earned with sweat and skill. Tasha earned $95,000 but lived a life that cost 3 times that. Her wardrobe was a rotating collection of designer labels. A $2,400 Burberry dress for a charity gala, $800 Jimmy Choo heels for a work event, a $6,000 Chanel purse just because. When Roman asked how she afforded it, she'd wave a hand and say, "It's a work expense, babe. You have to look the part." The truth was, Bernadette was the silent third partner in their marriage. She paid for the white BMW 3 Series Tasha drove, a $43,000 car, while Roman drove his paid-off Honda with 187,000 miles on it. Bernadette funded their vacations, not to the cozy cabins in the Blue Ridge Mountains that Roman suggested, but to 5-star resorts in St. Bart's where a single dinner could cost $700. During these trips, Roman felt like an accessory Tasha had forgotten to coordinate with her outfit. While she and her mother discussed stock portfolios and art auctions, he would talk to the resort staff, learning the names of the gardeners and the kitchen workers, finding a common language of hard work that felt more real than any conversation he had at the dinner table. His only real sanctuary, outside of the familiar, honest scent of grease and steel at the bus depot, had been his friendship with Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was an old-money Savannah gentleman, a reclusive millionaire who owned a dozen properties and a portfolio of blue-chip stocks. But to Roman, he was just Arthur, the guy who brought his vintage 1965 Jaguar E-Type to the depot. The other mechanics were afraid to touch it. It was a museum piece, a pristine silver bullet worth at least $250,000. But Arthur had seen something in Roman, a patience, a reverence for the machinery. "They see the price tag," Arthur had said once, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He was a wiry man in his late 70s, with kind eyes and hands as gnarled as an old oak tree. "You see the engine. You hear what it's trying to say." Their friendship blossomed over carburetors and gaskets. Arthur would come by the depot, not just for repairs, but to talk. He'd sit on an overturned bucket, dressed in a simple pair of khakis and a worn polo shirt, and listen to Roman talk about his life. He was the only person in Roman's orbit who seemed to understand his value. "That woman," Arthur had grumbled after Roman recounted a particularly cutting remark from Bernadette, "wouldn't know a diamond if it was staring her in the face. She only knows the receipts. Don't you ever let her make you feel like you're not enough, son." A man who can build something with his own 2 hands is worth more than 100 men who just inherit. Roman had taken those words to heart. Arthur became the father figure he'd never really had. He taught Roman about engines, but also about dignity. He never once made Roman feel small. He saw the strength in his calloused hands, the intelligence in his diagnostic mind. When Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack 3 months before that fateful Easter, Roman was devastated. He attended the funeral and stood in the back, a solitary figure in his simple suit. He saw Bernadette and Tasha there, in the front row. Tasha hadn't known about his deep friendship with Arthur. She only knew him as that rich old guy with the fancy car. Bernadette, however, was a different story. She was a prominent figure in Savannah's upper crust and had known Arthur for years through social circles. Roman saw her dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a performance of grief for a man she barely respected. Later, Roman learned that Bernadette had often used Arthur's name as a financial reference. It was a common practice in their world, leveraging the reputation of a wealthier, more established figure to secure loans and lines of credit. Arthur was the gold standard. His name on a document was as good as cash. Bernadette had apparently used him as a reference on several significant business loans to fund her lavish lifestyle and real estate ventures. She had no idea that the quiet mechanic her daughter had married was the man Arthur trusted most in the world. She had made a critical mistake, and the consequences were still sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. The drive home from Bernadette's house after the Easter signing was a tomb of silence. The air in Tasha's $43,000 BMW was thick with unspoken words. Roman sat in the passenger seat, the smell of expensive leather and Tasha's $250 Joe Malone perfume filling his lungs, and felt utterly alien. He looked at his wife, the woman who had just signed away their life together, as if she were canceling a magazine subscription. Her face was a mask of placid resolve. "So that's it?" he finally said, his voice raw. The sound was swallowed by the car's insulated interior. "That's it," she replied, not looking away from the road. "It's cleaner this way, Roman. No fighting, no drama." "No drama?" "Tasha, you ended our marriage at your mother's dinner table with her lawyer present. You called me a non-contributing spouse of questionable origin." "That's not drama." "It's just legal language," she said dismissively. "Marcus handles these things. You can't take it personally." "Not take it personally?" He felt a surge of cold, clear anger. "You just erased 7 years of my life. You sat there and let your mother call me a mistake. How am I supposed to take that?" She sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. It was the same sound she made when he'd tracked Grease onto the welcome mat. "Look, I'll have my things moved out by Tuesday. I've already arranged for movers. They'll be there at 9 a.m. The first month's rent is paid on the condo. The $20,000 will be wired to your account by the end of the week. It's all taken care of." She spoke with the detached efficiency of a project manager. There was no grief, no regret, just logistics. He was a line item on her to-do list, and she was checking him off. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just that she was leaving him. It was that she was acting like he had never mattered at all. When they got back to the condo on Oakmont Drive, she walked straight to the bedroom and began packing a small overnight bag. She moved with a purpose that told him this had been planned for weeks, maybe months. The Easter dinner wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a carefully staged final act. He stood in the doorway watching her. "Where will you go tonight?" "I'm staying at the Marshall House," she said, referring to a historic boutique hotel downtown, where rooms started at $400 a night. "I just need some space before the movers come." He watched her fold a silk blouse, the same one she'd worn on their 3rd anniversary dinner. He remembered that night. They'd gone to a small Italian place he loved, and he'd given her the silver locket. She had cried. She'd said it was the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received. Now that memory felt like a lie. "Was any of it real, Tasha?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She stopped packing and stood up, finally facing him. For a moment, he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a ghost of the woman he'd married. Then it was gone, replaced by a cool, hard shield. "I thought it was," she said. "I really did. But I grew up, Roman. And you didn't. You're still the same man I met 7 years ago. You're happy with your buses and your simple life, and that's fine. For you. But it's not enough for me. It was never going to be enough for me." She zipped her bag. "My mother was right. I was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's time to stop." The next day, Monday, was a hollow echo of a life that no longer existed. Roman woke up alone in their king-sized bed. The indent of her head was still on the pillow beside him. He went to the kitchen to make coffee, his body moving on autopilot. He reached for 2 mugs out of habit before catching himself. He put one back, the small clink of ceramic on the shelf sounding like a gunshot in the silent apartment. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Tasha. Movers are confirmed for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Please make sure you're there to let them in. They will only be taking my personal belongings. Another text arrived a minute later. And Roman, please don't make a scene. Let's be adults about this. He felt a wave of nausea. A scene? He was the one being dismantled piece by piece, and she was worried he might make a scene. The condescension was suffocating. He typed and deleted 3 different angry responses before finally just writing back a single word, okay. Later that afternoon, another text. It was a picture. Tasha and Bernadette, clinking champagne glasses on the veranda of the Ardsley Park house. The sun was shining. They were smiling. The caption read, "To new beginnings." He stared at the photo, at the casual, celebratory cruelty of it. They weren't just ending a marriage, they were celebrating his removal. He was an obstacle that had been cleared from their path. He looked at Tasha's smiling face and felt a profound, chilling sense of loss. It wasn't just the loss of his wife. It was the loss of the 7 years he had invested in a person who was, it turned out, a complete stranger. That evening, another text message arrived, this time from a number he didn't recognize. This is Marcus Thorne. I'm writing to inform you that the annulment has been filed with the Chatham County Courthouse. A hearing is set for Friday, April 21st at 10 a.m. Given that Ms. Hayes is providing a generous settlement and you have no legal grounds to contest, your attendance is a formality, but required. A process server will deliver the official summons tomorrow. A generous settlement. He looked around the condo at the $2,200 chrome bookshelf, the $3,500 sofa they'd bought to appease Bernadette, the kitchen filled with all-clad pots and pans he'd never been comfortable using. All of it was a stage set for a life he was never meant to be the star of. He was just a temporary character, and his role had been written out of the show. The outrage was a slow, rising tide inside him. It wasn't hot and explosive, but cold and deep. It was the quiet, simmering anger of a man who had been systematically devalued, dismissed, and discarded. He thought of Arthur's words, "Don't you ever let her make you feel like you're not enough." He went into the bedroom and opened his sock drawer. Tucked in the back was the $89 Timex watch. He picked it up. The crystal was scratched, the leather band worn. He strapped it to his wrist. The familiar weight was comforting. The steady, loud ticking was the sound of his own heart, beating strong and true. He had no idea what he was going to do, but he knew one thing: he would not be erased. Roman spent the night on the couch. The king-sized bed felt like a vast, empty tundra, and the silence of the condo was too loud. He didn't sleep. He just lay there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on Victory Drive, the minutes ticking by on his old Timex. He felt hollowed out, a building gutted by a silent fire. The next morning, Tuesday, he woke at 5 a.m., his mechanic's internal clock indifferent to his emotional state. He showered, the hot water a small comfort. He put on his work uniform, the heavy-duty blue pants and shirt with the county school district patch on the sleeve. He looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back looked tired, his deep brown skin drawn tight over his cheekbones, his eyes shadowed with grief. But he was still standing. He tied his locks back, the familiar motion a small anchor in the storm. He left the condo before the sun was fully up, unable to bear the thought of being there when Tasha's movers arrived. He couldn't watch them pack up her life, section by section, like a patient being dismembered. He drove his Honda to a small diner in his old Cuyler Brownsville neighborhood, a place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that was strong enough to strip paint. He ordered the number 3, 2 eggs, bacon, grits, and toast for $7.99. The waitress, a woman named Flo, who had known him since he was a boy, put a hand on his shoulder. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, baby," she said, her voice warm with genuine concern. "Just a long night, Flo," he said. "Well, you're in the right place for it," she said, pouring him a coffee. "Ain't nothing a plate of grits can't at least put a dent in." He ate slowly, the familiar, comforting food grounding him. This was his world. It wasn't fancy or polished, but it was real. The people here didn't care what kind of car you drove or who your mother-in-law was. They cared if you were a good person, if you worked hard, if you showed up for your community. He arrived at the bus depot at 6:47 a.m. The vast garage was already humming with life. The scent of diesel, grease, and industrial-strength coffee filled the air. His boss, a gruff but fair man named Sal, clapped him on the back. "Thompson, you're on bus 12. Transmission slipping in second gear. Think it's the clutch pack." "Got it," Roman said, grateful for the simplicity of the task. A slipping transmission was a problem he could understand. It had rules. It had a solution he could find with his hands. He spent the next hour under the massive yellow bus, his world shrinking to the nuts and bolts of the Allison 2500 transmission. The work was methodical, demanding, and blessedly mindless. He didn't have to think about Tasha or Bernadette or the word annulment. He just had to think about torque specs and hydraulic pressure. At 8:02 a.m., one of the younger mechanics, a kid named Leo, poked his head under the bus. "Hey, Roman, there's, some lady here for you." In a suit. Roman slid out from under the bus on his creeper, his hands and arms coated in a thick layer of dark transmission fluid. Standing by his workbench was a tall, elegant black woman who looked profoundly out of place in the grimy depot. She wore a sharp navy blue power suit that probably cost $1,500 and held a sleek, leather portfolio. "Roman Thompson?" she asked, her voice professional and crisp. "That's me," he said, wiping his hands on a red rag. He left a greasy smear on his cheek. "My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm a notary public and an associate from the firm of Sterling and Vance. I have a package for you from the estate of Mr. Arthur Pendleton." Roman froze. Arthur. It had been 3 months since his death. He hadn't expected to hear anything more. "I was instructed to deliver this to you personally and only to you. I need to see your ID, and then I'll need your signature," she said. Roman fumbled for his wallet, his greasy fingers making the leather slippery. He handed her his driver's license. She checked it, nodded, and then presented a form on a clipboard. He signed his name, the pen feeling strange and delicate in his calloused hand. She handed him the leather portfolio. It was heavy, substantial. "These are executor's documents and personal effects. The senior partner at my firm, Ms. Imani Vance, will be in contact with you shortly. She was Mr. Pendleton's personal attorney." And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the concrete floor, leaving a small wake of expensive perfume in the diesel-scented air. Roman stood there for a full minute, holding the portfolio. It felt like a bomb. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He walked over to his workbench, a cluttered space of wrenches, sockets, and oily rags. He carefully cleared a space and laid the portfolio down. His hands were trembling. He took a deep breath and unzipped it. Inside, the documents were organized with meticulous care. On top was a thick, cream-colored envelope with his name written on it in Arthur's familiar, spidery handwriting. He opened it. It was a letter. "My dearest Roman," the letter began. "If you are reading this, Then my old ticker has finally given up the ghost. Don't be sad for me. I've lived a long and fortunate life, the last few years of which were made richer by your friendship. I told you once that a man who builds with his hands is worth more than 100 who just inherit. I meant it. You have a skill, a character, and a dignity that money cannot buy, which is why I am giving you mine. Roman's breath hitched. He read the line again, which is why I am giving you mine. I have no children, and my remaining family are vultures who have been circling for years. I couldn't bear the thought of them squandering my life's work on frivolous things. I wanted my legacy to go to someone who understands the value of things, not just the price. Someone who knows how to build, not just consume. That person is you, Roman. My attorney, Imani Vance, will walk you through the details. She is the sharpest mind in Savannah, and you can trust her implicitly. I've left you everything. The properties, the portfolio, the accounts. Use it to build something good. Use it to build a life of your own design, free from the judgment of small-minded people. You are not a mistake, son. You are the finest man I have ever known. Your friend, Arthur. Roman's eyes filled with tears, which traced clean paths through the grease on his cheeks. He gently folded the letter and placed it on the bench. Underneath it was the top page of a legal document. It was titled, Last Will and Testament of Arthur J. Pendleton. His eyes scanned the page, past the dense legal text, until they landed on a specific clause. Article 3, Disposition of Estate. It read, I give, devise, and bequeath the entirety of my residual estate, real and personal, to my dear friend, Roman Thompson. He kept reading, his mind struggling to process the words. He turned the page, and then another. He found a summary of assets. It was a long list of stocks, bonds, real estate holdings, and bank accounts. At the bottom of the page, there was a number, an estimated total value of the estate. His eyes widened. He read the number once, then twice, certain he was misreading it. He wasn't. $18,247,550.34. $18 million. He sank onto a nearby stool, the world tilting on its axis. The sounds of the garage, the clang of metal, the hiss of pneumatic tools, the shouts of the other mechanics, faded into a dull roar. Just yesterday, he was a man whose life was being bought out for a generous settlement of $20,000. A non-contributing spouse. A mistake. Now he was something else entirely. He looked at his grease-stained hands. Arthur had seen their worth. And in a single stunning act of faith, he had given Roman the power to show everyone else. A slow, cold smile spread across Roman's face. The game had just changed, and Bernadette and Tasha had no idea they were even playing. What would you do if your entire world was turned upside down in a single moment? The shock, the disbelief, the sudden rush of power. It's a dizzying cocktail. Tell us in the comments what your very first move would be. For the rest of the day, Roman moved in a daze. He finished the transmission job on bus 12, his hands performing the familiar tasks while his mind reeled. $18 million. The number felt unreal, like a typo. He kept picturing the document, the precise accounting of assets, the final, staggering total. He felt Arthur's letter in his breast pocket, a warm weight against his chest. You are not a mistake, son. At noon his phone rang. The caller ID was an unknown number. He answered, his voice hesitant. Hello? Am I speaking with Mr. Roman Thompson? The voice was female, confident, and professional. It was a voice that commanded respect. Yes, this is him. Mr. Thompson, my name is Imani Vance. I was Arthur Pendleton's attorney. I believe my associate delivered a package to you this morning. Yes, she did. I got it, Roman stammered, feeling like a teenager caught off guard. Good, she said. I imagine you have some questions. A few, Roman said, the understatement of the century. I've cleared my schedule for you this afternoon. Can you be at my office at 3 p.m.? It's on Bull Street, across from Wright Square. Yes, I'll be there, Roman said, his heart pounding. Excellent. And Mr. Thompson? I would advise you not to speak to anyone about this. Not your wife, not your family, no one. The contents of that portfolio are, for the moment, a private matter. I understand, he said, thinking of Tasha and Bernadette celebrating their new beginning. The advice felt less like a legal instruction and more like a strategic command. He left work early, telling Sal he had a sudden family matter to attend to. He drove home, his old Honda feeling strangely small and inadequate, a relic from a life that was already fading into the past. He let himself into the condo. It was an eerie scene. Half the apartment was empty. The living room was bare where the $3,500 sofa and chrome bookshelf had been. The bedroom was stripped of all of Tasha's things, her clothes, her shoes, her expensive perfumes. All that remained was his side of the closet, his simple clothes looking lonely and out of place. The movers had been ruthlessly efficient. They'd even taken the fancy coffee maker. On the kitchen counter, which was now bare except for a single cheap mug he'd owned for years, was an envelope. His name was written on it in Tasha's handwriting. Inside was a check for $20,000. The memo line was blank. It wasn't a settlement. It was a dismissal. A final payment for services no longer rendered. He looked at the check, then at the leather portfolio sitting on the passenger seat of his car. The absurdity of it was almost comical. He left the check on the counter. At 2:45 p.m., he parked his Honda in a public garage near Wright Square. He felt self-conscious, his work boots and simple clothes standing out amidst the lawyers and bankers striding along Bull Street. He found the building, an old, elegant brick structure with a heavy oak door. The firm of Sterling and Vance was on the third floor. The office was the opposite of Marcus Thorne's sterile, modern aesthetic. It was filled with old books, rich wood, and African art. It felt powerful, rooted in history and wisdom. A receptionist led him to a corner office with a stunning view of the square. Imani Vance stood to greet him. She was the woman from the notary's photo, tall, poised, with her hair in elegant silver-streaked locks that were pinned up. She wore a tailored dress that was understated but clearly expensive, maybe $2,000. She radiated an aura of calm, unshakable competence. She was, Roman realized, a force of nature. "Mr. Thompson," she said, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm. "Please call me Imani and have a seat. I am so sorry for your loss. Arthur spoke of you often. He considered you family." "He was my friend," Roman said, his voice thick with emotion. "The best I ever had." "He felt the same," she said gently. "Which is why we are here? I assume you've reviewed the documents?" "I've skimmed them," Roman said. "The number, it doesn't seem real." "I assure you it is very real," Imani said, opening a file on her desk that mirrored the one he had. "The estate is valued at a little over $18 million. After estate taxes, which Arthur planned for extensively, you will be the sole beneficiary of a trust fund currently valued at approximately $18,247,550. The assets are a mix of equities, municipal bonds, and commercial real estate holdings here in Savannah. It's a well-managed, stable portfolio designed for long-term growth." She spoke about millions of dollars with the same calm demeanor Roman used to discuss brake fluid. He just listened, trying to absorb it all. "Now," she said, her tone shifting slightly, becoming more focused. "Arthur told me about your personal situation. About your wife and her mother." Roman was taken aback. "He told you about them?" "Arthur was a very shrewd man. He didn't just leave you his money. He left you his protection. He knew they underestimated you. He knew they looked down on you. He wanted to ensure you had the tools not just to thrive, but to defend yourself. She pulled out another folder. This one was thinner. Before he passed, Arthur was made aware that a Mrs. Bernadette Dubois, your mother-in-law, had been using his name and financial standing as a guarantor on several significant business loans. Roman's blood ran cold. She what? It's a distasteful but not uncommon practice in her circle, Imani explained. She'd list Arthur as a key financial partner or reference to secure favorable terms from banks. She took out 3 major loans in the last 2 years. One for $1.2 million to renovate her Ardsley Park home. One for $750,000 as a speculative investment in a commercial property on the south side, and a revolving line of credit with a $500,000 limit, which she has maxed out. The total liability is just under $2.5 million. Imani leaned forward. These loans were approved based on the bank's understanding that Arthur Pendleton, a man with a net worth of over $50 million at the time, was implicitly backing her ventures. They contain what's known as a key man clause. If the key man, in this case Arthur, dies or withdraws his support, the bank has the right to call the loans due immediately. Roman stared at her, the pieces clicking into place. With Arthur's passing, Imani continued, the estate is now the guarantor. And since you, Roman, are the sole beneficiary and executor of the estate, that means you are the guarantor. The room was silent for a long moment as the full weight of her words settled over him. So, what does that mean? Roman asked. It means, Imani said, a very faint, very sharp smile touching her lips, that you have a choice. You can choose to continue backing her loans, effectively allowing her to use your inheritance as collateral, or you can instruct the estate to formally withdraw its backing. If you do that, the bank will call her loans, all of them, immediately. She would likely have to declare bankruptcy within a matter of days. She would lose everything, the house, the investments, everything. Roman thought of the Easter dinner, the condescending laughter, a mistake we keep correcting. He thought of the text message, to new beginnings. He then looked at the summons for the annulment hearing, which he'd brought with him. He slid it across the desk to Imani. She read it, her expression hardening as she got to the part about him being a non-contributing spouse of questionable origin. She looked up at him, her eyes like polished steel. This is vile. They're offering me $20,000 to go away quietly, Roman said, his voice flat. Imani looked from the summons to the financial statement detailing Bernadette's loans. She looked back at Roman, who sat there in his work clothes, his hands clean, but his knuckles still scarred from 1,000 tiny battles with stubborn bolts. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense pitch, Arthur didn't just give you his money, he gave you a sword. The question is, are you going to use it? Roman met her gaze. The grief and confusion that had clouded him for days began to burn away, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He was not a mistake. He was not questionable. He was the man Arthur Pendleton had trusted with his entire legacy, and he would not let him down. The hearing is this Friday, he said, his voice steady for the first time in days. Can we be ready by then? Imani Vance leaned back in her chair, the $950 per hour meter in her head starting to run. Oh yes, she said. We can be ready. They had no idea what was coming. The days leading up to the annulment hearing were a blur of strategic preparation. Roman's life split into 2 parallel tracks. On one, he was the same man he'd always been. He got up at 5 a.m., put on his uniform, and went to the depot. He diagnosed a faulty EGR valve on bus 21 and replaced the air compressor on bus 7. He ate his lunch, a simple sandwich he now made for himself, out of a brown paper bag. He spoke to his co-workers about carburetors and sports, nodding along while his mind was miles away in the hushed, book-lined office on Bull Street. He was playing dumb, acting out the role of the simple mechanic they all believed him to be. His only communication with Tasha was through terse text messages. Tasha, the landlord needs you to sign a form releasing me from the lease. I left it on the counter. Roman. Okay. Tasha, did you get the check? Roman. Yes. Tasha, good. Just wanted to make sure you were taken care of. The condescension was a constant, low-grade hum beneath the surface of their interactions. She truly believed she was being generous, that her $20,000 was a noble act of charity toward the simple man she was leaving behind. She had no idea that the check was sitting on the counter, untouched, an insult he was saving. Meanwhile, on the other track, Roman was becoming a different man. Each afternoon at 3 p.m., he would leave the depot, change into a clean shirt he kept in his car, and drive to Imani Vance's office. There, for 3 hours, he would immerse himself in the world of the Pendleton estate. Imani was a brilliant teacher. Patiently, she walked him through the portfolio, explaining the difference between municipal bonds and equity funds. She showed him the deeds to 3 commercial properties in downtown Savannah, one of which housed a popular high-end restaurant. You're their landlord now, she told him. He learned that he owned a majority stake in a small local tech company and a portfolio of fine art that was currently on loan to the Telfair Museum. The scale of it was dizzying, but with each new piece of information, Roman felt a layer of the old, insecure man sloughing away. This wasn't just money. It was responsibility. It was a legacy. Arthur had trusted him to be its steward. Their primary focus, however, was the annulment and Bernadette's loans. Imani and her team of junior associates, who billed at a combined $1,200 per hour, worked with surgical precision. First, Imani said on Wednesday afternoon, we formally respond to their petition. She slid a document toward him. This motion rejects their grounds for annulment. It states that your 7-year marriage was valid, loving, and entered into in good faith. It dismisses their claim of misrepresentation as baseless and insulting. Roman read the document. Imani's language was powerful and direct, a stark contrast to the weaselly phrasing of Marcus Thorne's petition. Next, she continued, the loans. I have drafted a letter to the bank, First Union Financial. It is from you, as the executor of the Pendleton estate. It formally notifies them that the estate will no longer act as a guarantor for any and all liabilities held by Mrs. Bernadette Dubois. She pointed to a line. We will instruct my paralegal to timestamp this and have it messengered to the bank's legal department at precisely 10:15 a.m. on Friday morning. Why 10:15? Roman asked. The hearing is at 10 o'clock, Imani said with a razor-thin smile. I want to be on my feet, addressing the judge, at the exact moment the bank's internal alert system notifies them that a $2.5 million liability has just become unsecured. The machine will already be in motion before we even leave the courthouse. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was justice. Finally, she said, pulling out a third file, the hearing itself. Their entire case is built on the premise that you are, and I quote, a non-contributing spouse. They will paint you as a financial burden, a man of simple means who is holding their precious Tasha back. That's exactly what they'll do, Roman said, the old sting of the insult returning. Which is why, Imani said, we will not argue. We will not defend. We will simply present a new fact, a fact that reframes their entire narrative. She showed him a certified copy of Arthur Pendleton's will and a summary statement of the trust's assets. At the appropriate moment, I will introduce this into evidence. I will read the relevant passages aloud to the court. We will demonstrate that far from being a non-contributing spouse, you are in fact one of the wealthiest men in the state of Georgia. Their petition will be rendered not just baseless, but absurd. Roman sat back, the sheer, elegant strategy of it all taking his breath away. It wasn't a messy, emotional fight. It was a clean, precise demolition. He thought of Bernadette's favorite phrase, "We are people who correct our mistakes." He was about to correct hers. On Thursday evening, the night before the hearing, he got a call from Tasha. It was the first time he'd heard her voice in days. "Roman? I'm just calling to see if you're okay," she said. Her tone was strange, a little hesitant. "I'm fine, Tasha," he said, his voice calm and even. Good. Good. Look, about tomorrow, just let Marcus do the talking. It will be over in 15 minutes. There's no need to say anything, it's just a formality." "I understand," he said. There was a pause. "Are you sure you're okay? You sound different." "I'm just tired," he said. It wasn't a lie. He was tired of being underestimated, tired of being dismissed, tired of being their mistake. "Okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow then," she said and hung up. Roman stood in the empty living room of the condo. He was wearing his best suit, the $120 blazer from that terrible Easter dinner. It felt different now. It no longer felt like a costume he was wearing to try and fit in. It felt like a uniform. The uniform of a man who knew his own worth, a worth that had nothing to do with money, but was about to be proven by it. He laid the suit out for the morning, and for the first time in a week, he slept soundly through the night. Friday, April 21st, dawned bright and clear. A perfect Savannah spring day. Roman drove downtown not in his old Honda, but in a black Lincoln Navigator. Imani had arranged it. "Optics matter, Roman," she'd said. "We arrived not as a defendant, but as a plaintiff in a different kind of case." The car itself was a $90,000 statement of intent. He met Imani on the steps of the Chatham County Courthouse. She was a vision of power in an $8,700 Armani suit, the color of ivory, carrying a handsome leather briefcase that probably cost more than his first car. She gave him a small, reassuring nod. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," he said. They walked into the marbled, echoing halls of the courthouse. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and floor polish. They found the designated courtroom. Tasha, Bernadette, and their lawyer, Marcus Thorne, were already there, huddled together on a wooden bench. Bernadette looked magnificent in a crisp, white suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. She surveyed the courthouse with an air of bored ownership, as if it were simply another one of her properties. Tasha stood beside her, looking nervous, but determined. She wore a blush-pink dress and clutched her phone in her hand. When she saw Roman, her expression tightened. She glanced at his simple blazer, then at Imani, her eyes lingering on the lawyer's expensive suit with a flicker of confusion and perhaps a hint of professional jealousy. Bernadette didn't even bother to look at Roman. She simply gave Imani a dismissive once-over, sizing her up as a rival, not as Roman's counsel. "Marcus, who is that?" Bernadette murmured, just loud enough for Roman to hear. "Local attorney, Imani Vance. Decent reputation, but this is an open and shut case." "Don't worry," Marcus whispered back, radiating a smug confidence that set Roman's teeth on edge. They filed into the courtroom at 9:55 a.m. It was a small, wood-paneled room. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judge Althea Washington. Her gaze swept over the two parties. At precisely 10 a.m., she banged her gavel. "We are here to hear the petition for annulment in the case of Hayes versus Thompson. Mr. Thorne, you may begin." Marcus stood, smoothing his $4,000 Brioni suit. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward matter. My client, Ms. Tasha Hayes, entered into this union 7 years ago under a significant misapprehension of the defendant's character and station. The marriage has, for all intents and purposes, been a non-starter. My client has been the sole financial and emotional engine of the relationship. The defendant, Mr. Thompson, while a man of simple trades, has been a non-contributing spouse." He used the phrase with relish. "His origins and his lack of ambition have proven to be an insurmountable obstacle to a true and equal partnership. We are petitioning for a clean break, an annulment, to correct this youthful error in judgment. Ms. Hayes has generously offered a financial settlement of $20,000 to ensure Mr. Thompson is not unduly burdened by this dissolution." Judge Washington looked over at Roman with a neutral expression. "Mr. Thompson, do you have counsel?" Imani Vance stood. The entire atmosphere in the room shifted. She commanded attention without raising her voice. "I do, Your Honor." Imani Vance for the respondent, Roman Thompson. "Ms. Vance," the judge said, a hint of respect in her tone. "Does your client wish to contest this petition?" "We do, Your Honor," Imani said, her voice calm and clear. "We contest it in the strongest possible terms. We assert that this was a valid and loving marriage, and that this petition is not just baseless, but a malicious and defamatory action designed to humiliate my client." Bernadette let out a quiet, derisive scoff. Tasha shifted uncomfortably. "The petition's central claim," Imani continued, her voice ringing with clarity, "is that my client is a non-contributing spouse, that his financial station is so far beneath Ms. Hayes's that it constitutes a form of fraud. Is that a fair summary, Mr. Thorne?" Marcus looked flustered for a second. "It is, essentially, yes." "Very well," Imani said. "In that case, Your Honor, I would like to introduce a new fact into these proceedings. A fact that has only recently come to my client's attention. It fundamentally reframes the financial landscape of this relationship and renders this entire petition moot." She walked to the clerk and handed over a file. "This is a certified copy of the last will and testament of the late Mr. Arthur J. Pendleton, and a summary of assets for the trust he established." At the mention of Arthur's name, Bernadette sat up straight. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Marcus Thorne looked baffled. "Objection, Your Honor," Marcus said weakly. "Mr. Pendleton's estate has no bearing on this domestic matter." "On the contrary, Your Honor," Imani countered smoothly, "it has every bearing, particularly when the petitioner's entire case rests on an assertion of my client's financial inferiority." Judge Washington looked intrigued. "I'll allow it. Proceed, Miss Vance." Imani turned to face Tasha and Bernadette. She looked directly at them as she spoke, but her words were for the court. Her watch read 10:16 a.m. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, the respected philanthropist and businessman Arthur Pendleton passed away. He was a man of considerable wealth and influence in this city. As his will, now certified by the state of Georgia, makes clear, he left his entire estate to a single individual. He chose a person he believed embodied the values of hard work, integrity, and character." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the silent room. "He did not leave his fortune to his family. He did not leave it to a charitable foundation. He left it, in its entirety, to the man he called his best friend." Imani raised her voice just enough to cut through the stillness. "He left it to my client, Mr. Roman Thompson." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Tasha's face went completely white. Her jaw dropped, a small, audible click in the silence. Bernadette stared, her eyes wide with disbelief, her mask of bored superiority shattering into a million pieces. According to Article 3 of his will, Imani continued, her voice like a hammer striking an anvil, Mr. Thompson is the sole beneficiary of a trust valued, as of this morning, at $18,247,550.34. A collective gasp went through the small gallery. Marcus Thorne looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. At that exact moment, a sharp buzz vibrated from the plaintiff's table. It was Bernadette's phone. She glanced down at it, her face contorting in confusion. A notification from her banking app glowed on the screen. Imani didn't miss a beat. Furthermore, Your Honor, it has come to our attention that Mrs. Bernadette Dubois, the petitioner's mother, has secured approximately $2.5 million in loans by leveraging the good name of the late Mr. Pendleton. As the new executor of the Pendleton estate, Seguedao, my client has this morning instructed the estate to withdraw its backing for those loans. I imagine Mrs. Dubois will be hearing from her bank very, very shortly. Bernadette's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of gray. Her hand flew to her chest. She snatched her phone, her fingers fumbling with the screen. She read the notification, a look of pure, unadulterated horror dawning in her eyes. The loans were being called, all of them, due immediately. This is impossible, Bernadette whispered, her voice a strangled croak. Tasha was just staring at Roman. Her face was a maelstrom of shock, confusion, and a dawning, terrible understanding. She looked at the man in the simple $120 blazer, the man she had called a mistake, the man she had dismissed for $20,000, and saw not a mechanic, but a king. Imani Vance let the chaos bloom for a perfect, satisfying moment before delivering the final, devastating blow. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the rising panic, given that my client's net worth is approximately 50 times that of the petitioner, and that he is now the financial guarantor of her mother's collapsing business empire, the claim that he is a non-contributing spouse is, to put it mildly, absurd. We move for immediate dismissal of this petition, with prejudice. Judge Washington looked from Bernadette's ashen face to Tasha's stunned silence, then to Roman, who sat perfectly still, his expression calm and unreadable. She looked at the documents. She looked at Imani. A slow, wry smile spread across her face. Ms. Vance, she said, motion granted. She banged the gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot, marking the end of an era. This case is dismissed. The aftermath was a cascade of immediate and brutal consequences. The moment the gavel fell, the courtroom dissolved into chaos. Bernadette let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure agony, as the full reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She was staring at her phone, her fingers scrolling frantically through alerts from her bank. No, 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 she muttered, her voice trembling. This can't be happening. Marcus Thorne, his face slick with sweat, rushed to her side. Bernadette, calm down. We can fix this. We'll call the bank. We'll file an injunction. Fix this? She shrieked, her voice cracking, all pretense of composure gone. She turned on him, her eyes wild with fury. You told me this was open and shut. You let this happen. Tasha was frozen, her gaze locked on Roman as he stood up from the defendant's table. He looked at her, his expression not of triumph, but of a deep, quiet finality. There was no anger in his eyes, just a vast, unbridgeable distance. In that moment, she understood that she hadn't just lost a husband, she had lost a world she never even knew existed. She had thrown away a winning lottery ticket because she didn't like the color of the paper it was printed on. Roman and Imani walked past them without a word. As they passed, Tasha reached out a trembling hand. "Roman, wait," she pleaded. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "We need to talk. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." Roman finally turned to face her. He looked at her, then at her weeping mother, then back to her. "There's nothing to talk about, Tasha," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You made your choice. You signed the paper." He paused, letting the words land. "It was just a formality, remember?" He repeated her own words back to her, a devastating callback to their last phone conversation. Then he turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving her standing in the ruins of the life she had so carelessly demolished. The consequences enumerated themselves with brutal efficiency over the next few hours and days. Consequence 1. The Ardsley Park Veranda. By 2 p.m. that same Friday, First Union Financial's legal team had already filed an emergency motion to place a lien on Bernadette's assets. Her prized Ardsley Park home, a $2.1 million mansion that was the symbol of her social standing, was the primary collateral on the $1.2 million renovation loan. With the loan in default, the house was immediately placed into receivership. By Monday morning, a realtor was on the front lawn planting a for sale sign. Consequence 2. The luxury cars. The revolving line of credit Bernadette had maxed out had been used to finance her and Tasha's lavish lifestyles. This included the lease on her $115,000 BMW 7 Series and Tasha's $43,000 3 Series. With the line of credit frozen and called due, the leasing company was notified. On Tuesday, 2 tow trucks arrived simultaneously, one at Bernadette's now-for-sale mansion and one at the downtown marketing firm where Tasha worked, and repossessed both vehicles in front of horrified onlookers. Tasha had to take a $15 Uber back to the empty condo she no longer had a right to. Consequence 3. Social ruin. News of Bernadette's financial collapse spread through Savannah's elite circles like wildfire. Her $80,000 initiation fee and membership at the Oglethorpe Club were revoked for non-payment of dues. The charities she sat on the boards of quietly asked for her resignation. The friends who had once flocked to her parties now crossed the street to avoid her. She was a pariah, a living ghost haunting the edges of a world that had utterly rejected her. Consequence 4. Tasha's freefall. With Bernadette's financial support gone, Tasha's world imploded. The credit cards her mother paid for were all declined. Her salary of $95,000, once a handsome sum, was laughably inadequate to maintain the lifestyle she was accustomed to. She was forced to break the lease on the expensive downtown apartment she had planned to move into, losing her deposit. She was left with nothing but her designer clothes, which she soon began selling on luxury consignment websites for pennies on the dollar, to pay for rent on a small, bleak apartment far from the city center. The voicemails started that Friday afternoon. They were a perfect chronicle of Tasha's descent into desperation. Voicemail 1, Friday, 3:12 p.m. Angry, confused. "Roman, call me. We need to talk about what happened in court. My mother is a mess. I don't understand what you did, but you need to fix it. This isn't funny." Voicemail 2, Saturday, 11:04 a.m. Pleading. "Roman, please, pick up the phone. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. My mother, they're going to take the house. Please, you can stop this. I know you can. For us." Voicemail 3, Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Sobbing. "They took my car, Roman. They towed it from my office in front of everyone. I'm so humiliated. I don't know what to do. I have nothing. Please, I'm begging you. I still love you. I know I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. We can fix it. I'll do anything." Voicemail 4, Thursday, 9:47 p.m. Numb, defeated. "I'm at the old condo. I know you're not here. I don't know where else to go. I have the check, the $20,000. I know it's a joke now. I get it. I get everything now. I was a fool. I I wanted to hear your voice." Roman listened to each message once, his face impassive. He saved them not out of spite, but as evidence. Evidence of a character so profoundly flawed that it could only recognize value when it was displayed on a bank statement. He never called back. He had Imani's firm send one final formal communication to Tasha and Bernadette via Marcus Thorne. It was a restraining order, prohibiting them from contacting him or coming near his home or place of work. Enclosed with the order was the uncashed $20,000 check, torn neatly in half. A year later, the world was a different place. The sun, a familiar Savannah gold, streamed through the large bay doors of what was once the Chatham County School Bus Depot. The air no longer smelled only of diesel and grease, but also of fresh paint and new beginnings. A handsome, professionally painted sign hung over the entrance, Thompson and Sons Community Auto. The Sons was aspirational, a nod to a future Roman was building, and a quiet tribute to the man who had called him one. Roman, now 38, stood in the center of the immaculate workshop floor. He had bought the depot 6 months after the hearing, when the county decided to outsource its transportation services. He'd paid the $1.8 million asking price in cash. He'd spent another $500,000 renovating it, installing state-of-the-art lifts, diagnostic equipment, and a classroom space in the back. He wore a simple pair of dark blue overalls, custom-made and clean, over a plain white t-shirt. On his wrist was the old, scratched $89 Timex. It was the only watch he ever wore. The $18 million fortune was quietly managed by Imani Vance's firm, growing steadily. Roman drew a modest salary, enough to live comfortably, but simply in a small, historic house he'd bought in the Victorian district. The rest of the depot's profits, and a significant portion of the trust's annual yield, were funneled into a new foundation he'd started. The Pendleton Project, which gave scholarships and tool grants to young people in Savannah who wanted to learn a skilled trade. He wasn't alone in the shop. 2 young men, both barely 20, were working diligently on an old city bus he'd purchased for them to practice on. Their names were Jamal and Kevin. Roman remembered them from his bus driving days years ago. They'd been rowdy middle schoolers who always sat in the back. Now they were his first 2 apprentices, their tuition at the local technical college paid for by his foundation. "All right, Jamal. What are you hearing from that engine?" Roman called out, his voice echoing in the large space. Jamal, a lanky kid with bright, intelligent eyes, wiped his hands on a rag. "Sounds like a sticky lifter, Mr. Thompson. That ticking is too consistent to be an exhaust leak." "Good," Roman said, a proud smile on his face. "That's exactly right. You're not just listening with your ears. You're listening with your brain. That's the whole job right there." He had found his purpose. It wasn't in managing a vast portfolio or sitting on charity boards. It was here, on the concrete floor, with the smell of motor oil in the air, passing on the dignity and skill that Arthur had seen in him. He was building something. Not just a business, but a legacy of his own. A place where young men and women could learn that the work of their hands had immeasurable worth. One afternoon, as he was closing up the shop, a woman appeared at the edge of the property. It was Tasha. He hadn't seen her in person in over a year. She was thinner, and the expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple dress that looked worn. Her hair was growing out, the straightened ends giving way to an inch of her natural tight curls at the roots. She looked humbled, tired, and sad. She didn't approach him, she just stood there, about 100 feet away, watching him lock the great bay doors. He met her gaze across the distance. He felt no anger, no bitterness. He felt only a quiet, distant pity. He gave her a single, slow nod. Not of forgiveness, but of acknowledgement. an acknowledgement that their story was over and his was just beginning. She held his gaze for a moment, then turned and walked away. He never saw her again. Life teaches you that some people will only ever see you through the lens of their own ambition. They'll measure your worth in dollars and status, and if you don't fit their ledger, they'll write you off as a mistake. But true wealth isn't in a bank account or a zip code. It's in the skill of your hands. It's in the integrity of your character. It's in the community you build and the knowledge you pass on. It's about knowing your own value, even when the world tells you that you have none. Some people spend their lives correcting what they see as mistakes in others. The wise spend their lives building something true within themselves. We all face moments where we are underestimated. The greatest victory is not proving the doubters wrong, but proving yourself right. What does true wealth mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal.